Hello and welcome back to the Reapers. Today we're in our F-14B Tomcat and we're looking at using the Aim-9 Sidewinder. So first thing we're going to do is go to the armament screen. We can carry the Sidewinder on 1A, 1B, 8A and 8B, so that's 4 in total. We have the L or the mic version. They are similar in that they both have an all aspect seeking head. This means that the seeker head can detect a target whether he's flying away from us or towards us or side on or whatever. But the M is newer and superior all round to the L, so we're going to have the mic versions.
Request refueling.
While that's summing up, let's go and have a look at the controls today. We're going to be pressing weapon select Sidewinder missiles to select the missile. To fire the missile, we've got trigger. To lock for scene mode, we've got cage scene button. These missiles have an infrared seeking sensor on their nose. These sensors are mounted on gimbals and can swivel omnidirectional up to 40 degrees off bore sight. They are naturally sighted to the ADL line of the aircraft, and we'll show that here. That there. They're completely passive. They can be fired with or without a radar lock. When in passive mode, there is no way of IFFing the target apart from VID. Regards range, absolute maximum at high altitude with a head on target with a radar slave lock, we can do 10 miles. At the opposite side of that, down low, chasing a target, maximum 2 miles. There are two main modes of aiming and firing the Sidewinder. The first mode is cage to bore sight. In this mode, the seeker head of the missile is literally caged to our bore sight. For this aircraft, that's the ADL, the aircraft datum line, which is that cross there. It will never deviate from that ADL in this mode and cannot slave to a radar lock. The second mode is SEAM mode, spelled S-E-A-M. In its default state, it is centered around the ADL again, but rather than being caged, it performs a search pattern, as I'll show here. Whereas the cage mode gives us a total diameter search of about 2.5 degrees, the SEAM mode gives us, due to its search pattern, a total diameter of above 6 degrees. And with the scene mode, it allows us to actually lock the seeker head onto a target, and it will then follow that target off bore sight up to a maximum gimbal deviation of 40 degrees omnidirectional. And the scene mode can be used in two modes independently, or it can be slaved to a radar lock. To use the scene mode, we'll have the missile mode here set to normal as it is in default, and or we'll raise the ACM cover. To use the cage to bore sight method, we'll change the missile mode here down to bore sight. So let's get in the air and go and find a target. Okay, we're in the air now. We're going to band it to our 11 o'clock. Let's get everything set up. Make sure we're in air-to-air mode. Master arm on. Select the Sidewinder. You can see with the Sidewinder selected, we've got SW shown here and 4 of them available. Now notice that we've got a Sidewinder call switch here. So for the Sidewinders to operate, we have to call their seeker sensors. So we've got to turn this to on. As soon as we've turned that on, we'll hear the tone, the growl of the Sidewinder start, and we'll be able to use it. But according to the flight manual, it will not reach its optimum function level until about 60 seconds after we started the cooling. So let's turn that on now and listen. And so we've reached a level now where the selected Sidewinder is presenting its background growl. So this is the feedback that the infrared sensor on the selected missile is giving us depending on what heat it can see. And it can just see background heat at the moment. If we were to put it in a position where it could actually see the heat of a target, then the growl will become a high-pitched whine, and that's telling us that it's essentially got a lock on a target. Now if we look at the ACM panel, because it's warmed up now and ready to use, we can see that the active selected weapon has a checkered mark here above the chosen pylon. So 1B is selected at the moment. Now if we were to press our Sidewinder select button again, you'll see that it cycles between stations, so we can choose which missile we fire. So we can have 8B, 1A or 8A. So I've currently got it set to bore sight missile mode there, so we'll go and have a go with the bore sight mode first of all. The infrared seeker detection range depends on the heat of the target's engines and the range and their aspect. So we've got the ADL bore sight cross here, that smaller cross, and behind that is the larger Pipper crosshair, which is showing where the seeker head of the selected missile is aiming. And you can see it's directly over the ADL at the moment. And it has a detection diameter of about 2.5 degrees, something like I'm circling there. So what we're going to do now in bore sight mode is go maneuver our aircraft so that his aircraft is within that detection zone, and we should get a tone to fire. And that's the tone. Good to fire. So we can press fire, and there's a dead man. Now note that as soon as we move the target so that it's away from the bullseye, it no longer gets a lock. And he may have been out of range there, we'll just have to see. Yep, that was out of range. So next we're going to try the seam mode. So we're going to change the missile mode to normal, so it's now in seam mode. So now the actual seeker head is dancing around in the pattern that we saw previously, centered on the ADL here. So although this large crosshair showing the seeker head position is static at the moment, what it's actually doing is doing that kind of pattern to cover the 6 degrees diameter. Now with the version of DCS we've got at the moment, that is not represented by movement of the crosshair. We think in the future the crosshair will actually move with that search pattern, so just be advised that's something that may change. But just to prove that it's doing this pattern, what we'll do is hover the boresight over the hostile aircraft again, and you'll see that we get intermittent tone because the seeker head will only be getting tone when it dances across the target on its pattern. So let's show that. So you can see there, as it dances on its figure of 8 pattern, we only get a snippet of tone when it passes the aircraft. Now we could technically fire the missile when it's getting that snippet of tone, but that's not what seam mode is designed for. What it's designed for is to press the cage seam button at this point, and then it will perform a search within its 6 degrees of detection and try and lock onto a target. And when it locks onto a target, then it will stay rigidly locked on to that target, as we'll see, up to a deflection angle of about 40 degrees in any direction. So let's try that now. In fact, what we'll show first of all is trying to lock onto an area where the target cannot be detected, just to show what happens. So if I fall back just a bit here. Okay, I'm going to press the cage seam button now. And what you can see is that seam lock is engaged. This light will go on for 4.5 seconds while it searches for the target. If it cannot find a target within that 4.5 seconds, the seam lock will go off and it will stop searching until we try again. And you can see it's been 4.5 seconds. It couldn't find the target, so it's given up basically. So now let's try again, but with a hostile in a detectable area. We're going to press cage seam now. And you can see this time it's acquired a lock. He was in the 6 degree detection area. The seam lock will now stay on whilst we have a lock, and as long as he stays within the 40 degree detection area, we'll keep a lock. Now the beauty about this is we can now maneuver our aircraft to, say, add lead to the shot. I can point the aircraft out here to the left and take the shot, and the seeker head will still be tracking the target. So the missile will seek to the target. Now one thing I notice is that, at the moment at least, that tone is extremely loud, so we can actually turn that tone down with this knob here. Something a bit more sensible. Now I'm going to aim out in front of him. And I'm going to take the shot somewhere around there. Box 2. That should be a hit, because he's within 2 miles, I'd say. Kaboomy! That's him down. So that was showing using the seam mode independent of the radar. Next, it's time to show slaving to a radar. So we're going to need it in seam mode for this, which we've got. Next, we're going to get a radar. It has to be an SCT, a single target track. We're going to do that using PAL mode. So we're going to send that PAL mode out now. You can see we've now got a lock on the target. We know we've got a lock because we've got this diamond coming up, which is showing on the HUD where the STT lock is. And the seam mode is still doing its 6 degree dance pattern like we saw before, but it's no longer centered at the ADL. It's now centered at the target. So it's now dancing around something like that. It's dancing around where we've got the STT lock. And what we do is press the cage seam button again, and it will get a full lock on the target, if you like we saw last time. So let's just do that. You see now we've got the constant tone, and now we're good to fire, just like we did with the independent seam lock. Note just one thing: to slave the seeker head in seam mode to the radar lock, we have to be within a 20 degree omnidirectional of ADL here. And what we can do now is add some lead and take the shot again. But before we do that, we get extra symbology based on the STT lock we've got. First of all, we've got closure rate here. So if the caret here was showing 0, then there is 0 closure between us. There is a tiny bit of closure of about 20 knots at the moment. 200 knots, 400 knots, 600 knots, and 1,000 knots. And if he was getting away from us, up to minus 200 knots. Also, we get a range bar. This is a dynamic range bar. It will zoom in and out depending on how far away we are. At the moment, it's showing 5 miles there, nautical miles, 0 nautical miles. Where there, the caret shows that we're about half a mile away from him. Also, we get 2 symbols, Armin, Armax, showing the minimum distance that we can fire at the target. In this case, it's pretty much on top of him because this is a fast-fusing missile. And we also have Armax, the maximum ballistic range of the missile, with various things taken into account, like his direction, his speed, our speed, and whatnot. Armax at the moment, in my view, is completely wrong. It should be about 2 miles, something like that, in this kind of chase. And it's going to show 7 miles or something like that. So just bear in mind that at the moment, at least, March 2019, that is not very accurate. Right, so let's go and take a shot. Add some lead again. And that'll do. Fire. Fire, it's just a single small press of the trigger. Kaboomy. Right, so we've shown ball sight mode, we've shown seam mode independent of a radar lock, and we've seen seam mode slaved to a radar lock. That's all I've got to show on the Sidewinder. I hope that helps, and see you later.